Welcome to Measurement 101.
Hi, fourth graders. Today we're going to be learning about measurement, and there are two different systems of measurement. We have the American Standard Measurement, and then we have the metric system. And so you may have heard those words before, but I'm going to show you two sticks that we have here, and you'll see that if they're matched up down here on the bottom, the same length, if we look at the top, they're different lengths. That's because one of these is metric and one of them is the standard system. So metric is 1 meter. This is called a meter stick because it's 1 meter. What's really cool about metric system is that if you look at the end, 1 meter is 100 centimeters. And so that's just really easy to use. 1 meter equals 100 centimeters. In our standard system, this is called a yardstick, and the yardstick has 36 inches. And so it's just a little bit trickier if you say I have 2 yards and you're trying to figure that out in inches. You would have to do 36 plus 36, or if you had 3 yards, 36 plus 36 plus 36, or 3 times 36. But with the metric system, that's super easy. If 1 meter equals 100 centimeters, 2 meters is 200 centimeters, and 3 meters is 300 centimeters. So it's so much easier to use the metric system, especially when we're doing longer distances. So for this project, we are going to be using the metric system, which isn't as commonly used here in America. But if you're going to be an astronaut, or you're going to be in the biology field or any kind of science field, they almost all use the metric system. And so it's really important that if you are using science, that you know the metric system well. And so we are going to use that for our project. So remember that 1 meter equals 100 centimeters, and we are going to be using meter sticks to do our measuring.
All right, so let's see what this would look like. I measure my classroom. So I draw this box because our classroom is about a rectangle. And I measured this side first. I use the meter stick and I find out it's 11 meters long. We are going to be doing scale drawings, and so I also need to know that how many centimeters this is. So if I know that 1 meter equals, think in your brain, how many centimeters equal 1 meter? Hopefully you remembered, and it's 100 centimeters. And I'm going to show you the word centimeters is super long, and so I'm going to show you that's the word centimeters. My handwriting's kind of hard on here. I'm going to erase that and write shorthand cm for centimeters, and this is meters. So m for meters, cm for centimeters. If 1 meter equals 100 centimeters, 11 meters will equal, how many centimeters? Well, I'm really doing 100 times 11 because each one of those meters is 100 centimeters. Another way to think about it mentally is 1 times my number, so 11 times 1 equals 11, right? And then I can just add on those zeros because when we multiply by 0, we're going to get 0. So I have 11 meters equals 1100 centimeters.
Okay, so we're going to have to measure our classroom. But one of the most important things we're going to be able to measure is furniture. As you're deciding what furniture you want to purchase for the classroom, or what furniture you think should go in our classroom, you're going to need to think about the size. What if we ordered a table that didn't fit in the room? Or maybe the table you picked out is way too big and we can't get other things in the room. So that's one thing we're going to need to think about, is how do we make sure everything is going to fit in our room? And so we're going to have to be able to measure. Some things in our classroom we may want to keep, and so we can measure those exactly how they are. Maybe there's some things that we see on Amazon and we think it would be really cool to add to our classroom. Almost any product that you're going to buy will give you the measurements so that you can envision and imagine how much space it's going to take up. And so maybe we have to measure in here an imaginary table
and we could put tape on the floor to figure out what it would look like. But just to show you how to measure it and be thinking about those measurements, let's start with this table. I'm going to use my meter stick because remember we're measuring in metric system. I'm going to use my centimeters because you can see that if I measure the height of this table, my meter stick goes way above. And so I'm going to measure in centimeters because that makes more sense. I'm going to match up, I'm going to go here actually. I'm going to match up the bottom of my meter stick with the 0 end at the end of my table, and I'm measuring the height, which is how high something is off the ground. And so when I measure this up against the edge and I look at this, this is 45 centimeters. And so I would need to record that on my paper, and maybe I draw a picture of this table and I can write the height is 45. And so I might use an H for height and write 45 centimeters. I also not only need to measure the height, but I might need to measure the depth of an object and the width of the object. Okay, the depth is going to tell me how wide something is this direction, and then how wide this direction. So I have width and I have my depth. And so I might also want to measure that. So again, I'm going to line this up at the end, and I'm going to go on my centimeter side, and it's 55 centimeters. And then I can measure my depth, see how far away from the wall it's going to come, and it's 55 centimeters. So this must be a square top because it's 55 and 55. And my height was 45. So when I'm thinking about where I want to put that in my room, I can think about those measurements and think about where it fits. Another example of why I would need to know the height of a table is, for example, some of you might be interested in a standing desk or a standing table. Well, if I ordered this table for a standing desk, that wouldn't really work out because this isn't tall enough. So I might need to think about how tall I am and measure where I would want this workspace to be and try to find a table that's about that height. So get to measuring and try it out for yourself.
Okay, so let's say that you heard about this great auto stool from Target, and so you looked it up to see how big it was. You saw some kids sitting on it, but you wanted to know if it would fit in our classroom. So when you look at the product details, you'll see that it says dimensions right here, and it will tell you how tall it is, how wide it is, and the depth. You'll see those letters: height, width, and depth. So it says that the height is 17 inches. 17 inches, and that the width and the depth is the same, which means it's a perfect circle. Both of those are 16 inches. You may be thinking to yourself, Mrs. Jankard, you just told us that we're using a metric system. And so luckily we have this great tool called Google. In Google, we can search, I have to have the right key here. We can search in Google, convert inches to centimeters. Spelling it right would help. Okay, and it said it was 17 inches tall, so I'm going to put in 17 here, and I'm going to hit enter. And you can see that then it tells me that that would be 43 centimeters. And so I'm able to convert that so that I know what that looks like in the metric system. I can then enter a new quantity, the 16, and find out how many centimeters that is. And now I know the length using all the same system. So going back to my drawing, so now that I know my height is 43 centimeters. This project is going to require a lot of creativity and imagination. But one thing that will help with your imagination and visualizing what our room could look like is having a good grasp on measuring. The more you measure things, the better idea you get of how much 50 centimeters is. How long is 2 meters? Is a table that's 3 meters long enough, or too long, or just right? The only way to get really good at understanding what we need in our classroom, how big or small things should be in our classroom is to measure, measure, measure. I encourage you to measure as many things as you can in our classroom. Measure the windows. Measure how tall the windows are, how wide the windows are. Measure the door. How tall is the door? How wide is the door? Measure the bookshelves that we have. Measure the desks that we have. Measure how high the desks are. Do you like the height? Do you want something higher? Do you want something lower? Measure everything in our room. The more you measure, the better idea you will have in your head when people say 2 meters. You'll be able to picture something in your mind. Oh, I know that bookshelf is 2 meters long. And then when you're looking on Amazon or IKEA and it says this bookshelf is 3 meters long, you'll know what that looks like. And you'll start to be able to visualize it in your brain. And that will help with your imagination and creativity, bring it to life. If you don't really know what those measurements are, it's going to be really difficult to imagine what our classroom could look like. It's going to be hard to make sure that everything fits, and then we don't buy too much or not enough. So measure everything, have fun, check it all out, record all your answers so that if you ever are wondering, I wonder if a 2 meter high desk is tall enough to be a standing desk, you could go back and look at your drawings. Oh, our desk was this much. You can always measure again, but I think if you keep those measurements somewhere safe, somewhere where you can remember, that will be a great tool for you as we begin to pick out things that we want in our classroom. Have fun and measure everything. And as Kid President would say, give the world a reason to dance.